Hey everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I'm joined by Greg Smith, recruiting extraordinaire for Hail Varsity. He is just coming off of a very busy weekend. Nebraska had 2 commitments, 2 different camps, just a lot of activity. Greg, how are you? Are you sleeping?
I am well. Sleep has been fairly optional. After this, I'll probably have more coffee, but things are good. I am excited.
I haven't been drinking a whole lot of soda recently, but I definitely had to have some caffeine on Sunday because, like I said, there were 2 commitments. Before I dive into the question of the week, Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about these 2 commitments? Because Nebraska's been on a roll. This made for 4 commitments total in what, 2 weeks? So tell us about the Sunday commitments.
Yeah, so first you had Jake Apple, or first you had Grant Page. Sorry, there's so much happening. Grant Page, the wide receiver out of Boulder, Colorado. Actually, it was from the same high school as Kenny Bell, former Husker wide receiver. It's a really good high school that has had a lot of good talent over the years. Grant's probably 6'3", 185. And so he's, again, another one of those bigger bodied wide receivers that the Huskers have just been collecting over the last few years that can go and win 50-50 balls on the outside. He's really excited to be a Husker after his official visit a couple of weeks ago. And then the second commitment yesterday was Jake Applegate, the 6'4", 210, 215 kind of defensive athlete, I've been calling him, out of Lincoln Southeast. The Huskers had a lot of debate over what position they thought he was best suited for in college, but he said yesterday in his interview with me that they kind of settled on outside linebacker, which he was very, like, more than excited about. And he got to sit down and watch film with Coach Dawson for an hour or so. And so Nebraska has had a busy weekend after the round of official visits that they've had.
If you want to read anything about these commitments or any of the official visitors that have been around Nebraska in the last few days, or about ones that are still visiting, make sure to check out hailvarsity.com. And if you don't have a subscription yet, you should definitely get that as well, because Greg is definitely keeping everyone updated on all of this. It's a busy June, which leads into our recruiting question of the week a little bit. So Nathan on Twitter asked, so this last year, as we all know, has been very strange. A lot of players have not gotten eyes on them. So he assumes that the rankings, are going to fluctuate quite a bit once football starts this fall. He wants to know which Husker commits or targets that you feel, Greg, will have especially high jumps in the rankings once they're able to have a little bit more of a quote unquote normal season, fall, all of it.
Yeah, this is one of the really, like, fascinating questions of this cycle, because I know that it's so easy. The easiest way for fans to be able to identify if their team is recruiting well is to see the rankings, right? And so everybody wants to know, like, how, like, are our guys highly rated? Are they going to get bumped? So I think this is a really good question, especially coming off a year where, like, Ernest Hausman has not been seen by talent evaluaters. The guy that was the first commitment out of Columbus for Nebraska this year for this cycle. Victor Jones Jr., I think, was the very first name that I thought of, the Orlando wide receiver who committed back on, was it April Fool's Day, I believe he committed, but it was not a joke. And so he has been a guy who's gone out and still done a few camps here and there throughout this month. And I think that he's a guy that once people get a look at, that he could see a nice jump. I think Nebraska's quarterback commit, Richard Torres, is a guy that I know from talking to his high school coach was not seen at all on kind of any kind of camp circuit or, like, quarterback showcases or anything like that due to the last year of the pandemic. So I think that once people go and see him play this year, I think that he has a shot to be reevaluated as well.
We've talked quite a bit about this when we've had these questions each week, when we think back over the last year and how so many players were not able to get any kind of evaluation. It will actually be really interesting. So for anybody, in my opinion, for anyone who's always about, like, stars don't matter, rankings don't matter, this last year, the 2021 class, will be really actually quite fascinating to watch it evolve over the next few years, because I think a lot of them may not have been rated correctly because there was no way to, in some cases, players had shortened seasons, they didn't have seasons, they were working and operating off of old film and tape. So I think this will be interesting through this fall to almost watch itself correct. It's a bit like, I do also hesitate a little bit because I do think some of it might honestly spike really far the other direction. But it will be interesting to kind of see how things self-correct going into this fall, and to see if like maybe people are hesitant to say too much, or if they, like I said, go very, very far where it's like we can see players now rank them, like let's go crazy.
Yeah, but it also might be a situation too where like the people going out to rank players all over the country, they're humans and these are like
They
jobs that
are
they have to
humans,
do,
remember
right?
that.
And so there's only so much of this they can do, right? And so if you've got just all of these kids around the country that have not been ranked, like you still might have guys that end up falling through the cracks because, oh, by the way, they're not ranking one class at a time, right? They're not just going to go out to try and only catch up on the 2022 class. They're also looking at 23 and 24 to get early evaluations on those guys. So I still think you're going to have guys that end up falling through the cracks. Like as usual, it's just a premium thing to have a coaching staff that knows what they're looking for, like can close on those guys and then are able to develop those guys within their system and in their program. Like I think that ultimately that's always what it comes down to, no matter who gets bumped and who doesn't. I totally understand why people want to see their players end up getting re-rated and get ratings bumps.
And I totally already can hear the comments of there's going to be somebody who's like, that's great, I want to see it translate on the field. And like, I hear you, but I will say at least this Nebraska staff is very good at early identifying players very early in the recruiting, because who was it that just this weekend Nebraska was his very first offer?
Oh, it was the 2023 defensive back out of Iowa, Watts McBride.
Yes. And that's always interesting because those are things where staffs are making calls before there is a lot of rating or any rankings to really go off of. And that's been pretty consistent for this Nebraska staff, both at Nebraska, even previously at Central Florida. They tend to offer early, and then you see those recruitments skyrocket where individuals get a lot more offers seemingly after Nebraska has offered. But that's also a part of it is, you know, you have to kind of trust your gut as a staff. So I get it. I hear the people who are already commenting and going, that's, they need to make it work on the field. I don't care so much about early evaluation if it doesn't translate. I hear you. But when it comes to seeing some of the recruitments take off, this staff certainly sees players for what they are before those rankings even come in.
Yeah, they are very good at that. Really, the best example from this recruiting class is Jaron Kanak, the four-star athlete out of Hays, Kansas, who was unrated when Nebraska offered him. And then he had Nebraska in his top 5, removed them, and he was on an official visit to Alabama this weekend. So it happens, and it feels like it happens every year for Nebraska. So they are good at evaluating. They just have to get there to where they can close on some of those guys that really take off later in the process.
I hear you. If you are somebody who wants to know more, definitely check out hailvarsity.com this evening. Greg will have additional thoughts on this exact topic in his recruiting notebook, which goes live at 6 p.m. Central. But again, we've said this every week. You can check out the recruiting notebook every day, Sunday through Thursday. So not every day, but 5 days a week, Sunday through Thursday, 6 p.m. Central at Hail Varsity. You might as well bookmark it. It's appointment reading. On Mondays, we obviously do the recruiting question of the week, and then Greg follows up with more information. So if you want to dive further into this topic, you'll see that. And that is actually sponsored by Pinnacle Bank. So we're appreciative of them. And yeah, Greg has been very busy. It's not going to slow down. So when we talk about rankings and everything else to come, we're definitely kind of like, it might be summer, but the off season doesn't exist, especially in recruiting.
No, it never really ends, which makes it fun but maddening at the same time.
So, well, if you're a recruiting fan, hey, at least you know there's plenty to come. So Greg, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time sharing some of your thoughts on this. And thank you, Nathan, for the question. We will be back next week. So keep leaving your questions in the comments below here on YouTube or on Facebook, Twitter, does not matter where you're watching this. You can actually tweet at Greg, at Greg Smith HV, or at Hail Varsity if you have any questions. And we'll be back next week. But in the meantime, be sure to bookmark hailvarsity.com. Go get yourself a subscription. And we'll talk to you later. Thanks.